Hallo, ich lese euch ein paar Seiten aus Hugh Laurie's The Gunseller vor. Ein Buch von 1996, sehr lustig, parodiert den Kriminalroman. Imagine that you have to break someone's arm, right or left, doesn't matter. The point is that you have to break it because if you don't, well, that doesn't matter either. Let's just say bad things will happen if you don't. Now my question goes like this. Do you break the arm quickly? Snap, whoop, sorry, here let me help you with that improvised splint? Or do you drag the whole business out of a good 8 minutes? Every now and then increasing the pressure in the tiniest of increments until the pain becomes pink and green and hot and cold and altogether howlingly unbearable. Well, exactly, of course. The right thing to do, the only thing to do, is to get it over with as quickly as possible. Break the arm, ply the brandy, be a good citizen. There can be no other answer, unless, what if you were to hate the person on the other end of the arm? I mean, really, really hate them. This was a thing I now had to consider. I say now, meaning then, meaning the moment I am describing, the moment fractionally, oh so bloody fractionally, before my wrist reached the back of my neck and my left humerus broke into at least 2, very possibly more, floppily joined together pieces. The arm I've been discussing, you see, is mine. It's not an abstract philosopher's arm. The bone, the skin, the hairs, the small white scar on the point of the elbow, one from the corner of a storage heater at Gates Hill Primary School, they all belong to me. And now is the moment when I must consider the possibility that the man standing behind me, gripping my wrist and driving it up my spine with an almost sexual degree of care, hates me. I mean, really, really hates me. He is taking forever. His name is Rainer, first name unknown, by me at any rate, and therefore presumably by you too. I suppose someone, somewhere, must have known his first name, must have baptized him with it, called him down to breakfast with it, taught him how to spell it, and someone else must have shouted it across a bar with an offer of a drink, or murmured it during sex, or written it in a box on a life insurance application form. I know they must have done all these things, just hard to picture, that's all. Rainer, I estimated, was 10 years older than me, which was fine. Nothing wrong with that. I have good, warm, non-arm-breaking relationships with plenty of people who are 10 years older than me. People who are 10 years older than me are, by and large, admirable. But Rainer was also 3 inches taller than me, 4 stones heavier, and at least 8, however you measure the violence, units more violent. He was uglier than a car park, with a big hairless skull that dipped and bulged like a balloon full of spanners, and his flattened fighter's nose, apparently drawn on his face by someone using their left hand, or perhaps even their left foot, spread out in a meandering, lopsided delta under the rough slab of his forehead. And God Almighty, what a forehead! Bricks, knives, bottles, and reasoned arguments had, in their time, bounced harmlessly off the massive frontal plane, leaving only the feeblest indentations between its deep, widely spaced pores. They were, I think, the deepest and most widely spaced pores I've ever seen in human skin, so that I found myself thinking back to the council putting green indelbity at the end of the long, dry summer of '76. Moving now to the side elevation, we find that Rainer's ears had, long ago, been bitten off and spat back to the side of the head because the left one was definitely upside down, or inside out, or something that made you stare at it for a long time before thinking, oh, that's an ear. And on top of all this, in case you hadn't got the message, Rainer wore a black leather jacket over a black polo neck. But of course, you would have got the message. Rainer could have swathed himself in shimmering silk and put an orchid behind each ear, and nervous passers-by would still have paid him money first and wondered afterwards whether they had owed him any. As it happened, I didn't owe him money. Rainer belonged to that select group of people to whom I didn't owe anything at all. And if things had been going a little bit better between us, I might have suggested that he and his fellows have a special tie struck to signify membership, a motive of crossed paths perhaps. But as I said, things weren't going well between us. A one-armed combat instructor called Cliff, yes, I know, he taught unarmed combat, and he only had one arm. Very occasionally, life is like that. Once told me that pain was a thing you did to yourself. Other people did things to you. They hit you or stabbed you or tried to break your arm, but grievously bodily harmed, either of which meant at least 5 years. Oh, sorry. But pain was your own making. Therefore, said Cliff, who had spent a fortnight in Japan and so felt entitled to unload dog shit of this sort on his eager charges, it was always within your power to stop your own pain. Cliff was killed in a pub brawl 3 months later by a 55-year-old widow, so I don't suppose I'll ever have a chance to set him straight. Pain is an event. It happens to you, and you deal with it in whatever way you can. The only thing in my favor was that, so far, I hadn't made any noise. Nothing to do with bravery, you understand. I simply hadn't got round to it. Up until this moment, Rainer and I had been pinging off the walls and furniture in a sweatily male silence, with only the occasional grunt to show that we were both still concentrating. But now, with not much more than 5 seconds to go before I passed out, or the bone finally gave way, now was the ideal moment to introduce a new element, and sound was all I could think of. So I inhaled deeply through my nose, straightened up to get as close as I could to the face, held the breath for a moment, and then let out that Japanese martial artists refer to as a kiai. You'd probably call it a very loud noise, and that wouldn't be so far off. A scream of such blinding, shocking, what the fuck was that intensity that I frightened myself quite badly. On Rainer, the effect was pretty much as advertised, because he shifted involuntarily to one side, easing the grip on my arm for about 1/12 of a second. I threw my own head back into the face as hard as I could, feeling the jizzle in his nose adjust itself round the shape of my skull and silky wetness spreading across my scalp. Then brought my heel up towards his groin, scraping the inside of his thigh before connecting with an impressive bundle of genitalia. By the time of the 12th of a second had elapsed, Rainer was no longer breaking my arm, and I was aware suddenly of being drenched in sweat. I backed away from him, dancing on my toes like a very old Saint Bernard, and looked around for a weapon. The venue for this pro-am contest of 1/15th minute round was a small, inelegantly furnished sitting room in Belgravia. The interior designer had done a perfectly horrible job, as all interior designers do, every single time without fail, no exceptions, but at that moment his or her liking for heavy portable objects happened to coincide with mine. I selected an 18-inch Buddha from the mantelpiece with my good arm and found that the little fellow's ears afforded a satisfyingly snug grip of the one-handed player. Rainer was kneeling now, vomiting on a Chinese carpet and improving its color no end. I chose my spot, braced myself, and swung at him backhanded, plugging the corner of the Buddha's plinth into the soft space behind his left ear. There was a dull, flat noise of the kind that only human tissue under attack can make, and he rolled over on his side. I didn't bother to see whether he was still alive. Callous, perhaps, but there you go. I wiped some of the sweat from my face and walked through into the hall. I tried to listen, but if there was any sound from the house or from the street outside, I would never have heard it because my heart was going like a road drill. Or perhaps there really was a road drill outside. I was too busy sucking in great suitcase-sized chunks of air to notice. I opened the front door and immediately felt cool drizzle on my face. It mingled with the sweat, diluting the pain in my arm, diluting everything. And I closed my eyes and let it fall. It was one of the nicest things I've ever experienced. You may say that it's a pretty poor life I've been leading, but then you see, context is everything. I left the door on the latch, stepped down to the pavement and lit a cigarette. Gradually, grumpily, my heart sorted itself out and my breathing followed at a distance. The pain in my arm was terrible, and I knew it would be with me for days, if not weeks, but at least it wasn't my smoking arm. I went back into the house and saw that Rainer was where I'd left him, lying on a pool of vomit. He was dead, or he was grievously bodily harmed, either of which meant at least 5 years, 10 with time added on for bad behavior. On this, from my point of view, was bad. I've been in prison, you see, only 3 weeks, and only on remand. But when you've had to play chess twice a day with a monosyllabic West Ham supporter who has hate tattooed on one hand and hate on the other, using a set of missing 6 pawns, all the rooks and 2 of the bishops, you find yourself cherishing the little things in life, like not being in prison. I was contemplating these and related matters and starting to think of all the hot countries I'd never got around to visiting, when I realized that noise, that soft creaking, shuffling, scraping noise, was definitely not coming from my heart, nor from my lungs, nor from any other part of my yelping body. That noise was definitely external. Someone or something was making an utterly hopeless job of coming down the stairs quietly. I left the Buddha where it was, picked up a hideous alabaster table lighter, and moved towards the door, which was also hideous. How can one make a hideous door? You may ask. Well, it takes some doing, certainly, but believe me, the top interior designer can knock off this kind of thing before breakfast. I tried to hold my breath and couldn't, so I waited noisily. A light switch flicked on somewhere, waited, then flicked off. A door opened. Pause. Nothing there either. Closed. Stand still. Think. Try the sitting room. There was a rustling of clothing, a soft football, and then suddenly I found I was relaxing my grip on the alabaster lighter and leaning back against the wall in something close to relief, because even in my frightened, wounded state, I was ready to stake my life on the fact that Nina Rich's Fleur de Fleur is just not a lighting scent. She stopped in the doorway and looked round the room. The lights were out, but the curtains were wide open and there was plenty of light coming in from the street.